أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على جميع الأنبياء والمرسلين لا سيما خاتمهم وأفضلهم محمد مصطفى صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم وعلى أهل بيت الطهارة لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين الحجة ابن الحسن أجر الله تعالى فرجه الشريف. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي هلت بفنائك، عليك منا جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعل الله آخر عهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. Please recite the salawat. أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وقوله الحق: لقد خلقنا الإنسان في أحسن التقويم ثم رددناه أسفل السافلين. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. My elders, dearest brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In keeping with our pattern, keeping with our theme, tonight, please recite the salawat. Sorry about that. So in keeping with our pattern and keeping with our theme, tonight's lecture I would like to dedicate to another very, very special group of people. As we said, I would be taking the time to honor people who have inspired me in my past and in my present. And the group of people I would like to honor today are teachers. Teachers are such an important part of our lives, especially in growing up. They influence us, they shape us, they bring us up. And like people in the mental health profession, it is a labor of love. And as a result, you feel the love with them. So exalted is the station of a teacher in Islam that we have a narration attributed to Amir al-Mu'mineen where he says, Man allamani harfan faqad sayyarani abdan. The one who has taught me a word has made me his servant. In the UK where I live, there are a very, very special group of teachers that I have a chance to work with. At the madrasa in London, there is a grade which they have instituted in the madrasa there, which is after madrasa studies are officially over. It would be the equivalent, I think it would be the equivalent of grade 10 over here. Madrasa finished theirs at grade 9. This particular grade is known as the Higher Education Department, and it is run by a number of individuals. And the purpose of this grade, and this is why I like it so much, is that it doesn't teach a set curriculum like they do at the madrasas in the previous grades. This particular curriculum is specifically developed for that age group to basically help them with life from Monday to Saturday. So we cover a plethora of issues, you name it. Anything that we can come up with in consultation with the children and in consultation with the parents that affects them from Monday to Saturday is what we cover with them. The dedicated individuals that run this department, and I've had the absolute pleasure of working with them, is headed up by the principal of the Shia Athnashri Madrasa in the UK, Brother Mason Jaffer, who is one of the most decent and most wonderful human beings I've had the opportunity to meet. And the HED team is led by Sister Shaheen Mirali, Sister Safiya Tharu, Sister Taskeen Jaffer, Brother Abbas Mirali, Brother Abdul Rauf Shakoya, Sheikh Zuhair Ismail, and I also have the benefit and the great honor and privilege to be a part of that team. So tonight I would like to salute teachers from all walks of life, secular studies, Islamic studies, even mentors in our community. My respect and my love for you is great. May Allah bless each and every one of you. And may Allah show you the fruits or the flowers that bloom and you so painstakingly partake to nurture these things. Please recite a salawat. In our journey from the first night until now, what is the fifth night? We started off by introducing the concept of the fitrah, that wonderful blessing that Allah breathed into all of us, that divine relationship that we share with Allah, that connection we have with Him that doesn't allow us to forget our true selves, because our true selves is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our origin is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it acts as a beautiful container, and within that container contains these seven virtues that Allah explicitly identifies in the Quran, where He talks about, I love these people. In Arabic, the phrase used is Allah yuhibbu. So Allah yuhibbul muttaqeen, Allah yuhibbul mutawakkilin. Allah loves those people of taqwa. Allah loves those people of sabr, and so on and so forth. We talked about how when these seven qualities and an awakened fitrah come together to culminate in the insan al-kamil, the complete and the whole human being. And then we started one by one. We went through taqwa to talk about the first awakening, the first conscious awakening of insan in their awareness and their consciousness of God. Then we moved on to sabr, the divine patience and perseverance. In the third night, we covered, tawakkul, yes. We covered tawakkul, that trust and reliance in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah, so we've gotten to tawakkul. Tonight we move to Qist, right? Now, in understanding Qist, so one of my dear sisters yesterday pointed something out to me, which I'm glad she pointed out to me, because if she didn't, I would have continued doing it. People like me, because we've been working with these Arabic terms for so long, we literally take for granted that you all know what it means. So that's my bad. So I will try my best, and feel free if at any point in time, if you feel I'm using terminology that you don't understand, just feel free to put your hand up and say, I don't understand. No problem at all. So Qist is defined as justice. But is there another term that we've heard growing up that's defined as justice? Can anybody tell me? Adl, right? Adl, adala. So now the question is, okay, what's the difference between the two of them? The two do in fact mean justice, but they are implementations and manifestations of justice in very different ways. So let's define adl first, right? Adl comes from the root meaning balance, equity, straightness, and represents the foundational principle of virtue, the virtue of justice itself, right? Qist, from its root, is meaning fair distribution. Proper measure represents the practical manifestation of justice. So, in other words, adl is a state and is the state of justice, and qist is the practical application of that justice. Okay? So, for example, we'll demonstrate by way of example, both adl and qist. A judge's character being fair and unbiased, his character being fair and unbiased is adl. That judge is adil. Okay? The verdict that judge delivers after reviewing evidence and applying the law with fairness is qist. They're not separate from one another, but they work one another. You can't have qist without adl. That's clear. Now, you must be wondering, all this talk of justice, right? What are we going to be talking about? Are we going to be talking about the injustice in the world? Are we going to be talking about everything that's going on in the world? Based on the pattern that we've been following, what do you think the answer to that is? No, we're not. Not directly. What we are going to do is to take the concepts, because the concept of adl and qist feed into each other. Adl lays the foundation for us to behave with qist, to become of the muqsit, to become of the muqsitin. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to take qist and we're going to turn it inwards and look at ourselves. And why are we going to look at ourselves and why this internal work matters? You see, when we look around us today, there is a world that we live in. There is a universe that we live in. But I bring your attention to a narration attributed to Amir al-Mu'mineen in Nahjul Balagha. What does he say? He says, you think you are a small entity, but within you is a universe. Within you is a universe. The external world that we see is also a reflection of the world that exists inside of us. There is a whole world that exists inside of us, right? Now you must be wondering, how is it that we can apply adl and qist to our internal being? Please recite the salawat. Question. Qist, we know as a practical manifestation of adl, is an action. Right? I want you to think about this. If we take qist and apply it internally, what do you think that internal action is? Even putting qist aside, an internal action, what do you envision an internal action to be? Go ahead.
If you want justice for yourself, you should have the same justice for others.
Okay. Justice for yourself, justice for the outside. Okay. Anybody else? Reflection. Okay. Compassion. Okay. We'll come back to this. These are all very good points, right? The Quranic foundation of qist is to be found in Surah number 4, verse 135. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kunu qawwamina bil qist shuhada'a lillahi walau ala anfusikum. O you who have faith, be maintainers of justice, witnesses for Allah, even if it be against yourself. Bear witness against yourself. There's something very beautiful in this verse. Allah says, even if it is against yourself. So this isn't about external activism first. This is about internal activism, right? This is about developing the adl to witness the truth when it challenges everything we've believed about ourselves. And then having the qist to act upon that truth. Both dynamics working together in harmony. So, let us look at the application of adl as an internal intervention. Internal adl is like developing spiritual eyes. Spiritual eyes that can see our inner landscapes very clearly. Recognizing when our fears are sitting in the seat that belongs to our values. When our past is making decisions that belong to our present. When our ego is wearing the crown that belongs to our authentic self. This isn't about judgment. This is about loving recognition of divine order. I will come to an example. This is theoretical right now, and we'll get to an example. What does qist look like internally? Qist is the gentle courage to actually rearrange our inner world according to what our adl identifies in us, what our adala identifies in us, right? It is like a loving parent to our own soul, tenderly but firmly helping each part of us find a rightful, healthy place within the family of our existence. In other words, when we take adl and look at ourselves, adl is a type of awareness, is a type of self-awareness, looking deep within ourselves to see what is taking place in the world of ourselves. And when we see what is going on with us, that adl comes up and says, okay, this, what's going on with you, this fear you have, it's not in its place. This ego you have, or this past that's influencing your present, that's not in its place. Because remember, whether it's qist or whether it's adl, the Islamic concept of justice, very simply put, whether it's adl, whether it's qist, is to put things in their rightful place. That is the ultimate definition of justice from the Islamic perspective. So what adl does is, adl looks inside of you and identifies what is out of place. This is out of place, that is out of place, this is not in its place. And it brings about that awareness to identify that this is out of place. Qist comes along after adl and takes those things and begins to either remove them or place them in its rightful place within you. It's all very abstract, so let's move to a practical example. The practical example is choosing authenticity over people-pleasing. You've heard of the term people-pleasing. I hope you've heard of the term people-pleasing. If not, I'll give you a definition, because I prepared it. People-pleasing is when someone puts others' needs, wants, and approval above their own, often at the cost of their own well-being, in order to avoid conflict or gain acceptance. I'll read that again, because people-pleasing, in my lived experience, is very common in our culture. People-pleasing is when someone puts others' needs, wants, or approval above their own, often at the cost of their own well-being, in order to avoid conflict or gain acceptance. Before we move to the example of people-pleasing, right? People-pleasing could be, find yourself in a situation where you are in a relationship, and in that relationship, the other party is bullying you. You suppress your own desire to express that this is painful for me in order to avoid conflict, because you're afraid of conflict. You don't want to rock the boat. You don't want to change up the status quo, right? The reason why I bring up the example of people-pleasing is, and again, going back to the first night promise I made you. I said to you that in the space that we are over here, I would bring all parts of myself, including my vulnerable parts, right? Because my way of being and my values dictate to me that in order to be authentic with you, I have to show vulnerability, because I've asked you to be vulnerable in the space with me, right? Now I realize, I am very cognizant that perhaps my vulnerability might make some of you uncomfortable. But I'm also going to tell you there's also no apology forthcoming for that, because I also believe that this vulnerability, this ability for us to connect relationally in our communities is something that has been lacking. Because, and again, I will only give my example. I'm not going to project onto anybody. But my own example growing up in this community, there were at various junctures where I found my community unsafe to be able to express my own vulnerability. Because I saw that if I expressed my vulnerability, I'd get made fun of, it'd be weaponized against me, I'd get stigmatized, all these things. When we talk about difficult conversations, our community needs to have difficult conversations. We need to have these difficult conversations because we need to foster an environment of mercy, care, compassion, and most of all, safety. To be able to be safe is a very important need of a human being. Just as important as it is to feel a sense of belonging. But what ends up happening, again, this is my lived experience. I don't know what it's like for you, and I won't pretend to know what it's like for you. I can guess what it's like for you, but I won't. But there becomes a conflict. That inherent need for me as a human being, the social creature as I've been created, the inherent need to feel belonging to something is then in conflict with the fact that I don't have a safe place to feel that sense of belonging. What do you think ends up happening? This is not a criticism on anybody. This is not an attack on anybody. But often I hear from my elders. I hear from my elders a lot. The youth are not coming, the youth are not coming, the youth are not coming, the youth are not coming. Well, this is one of the reasons why the youth are not coming. Because today, our youth know better. Their system of education mental health is incorporated in their system of education. They're much more aware of these things, right? And they're not going to, and I'm not speaking as a youth, I'm 50 years old, yeah? I feel like a youth many times, but I have to remind, when I wake up in the morning and my knees sound like a box of Rice Krispies rather, I know I'm not a youth anymore, okay? But growing up here and going through what I went through in this community and also watching as well too, these are some of the core issues that we have to look at. We have to create safe space, and by creating safe space, we have to nurture an environment that allows us to be vulnerable with each other, that allows us to have difficult conversations, that allows compassion, empathy to flourish. Please recite a salawat. So speaking of vulnerability, we take the example of people-pleasing. Now, I myself, growing up, suffered from people-pleasing. I still struggle with it till this day as a part of my life. I wasn't able to identify it in my personal therapy, but somewhere along the line, I felt a lack of validation in my life. And as a result of feeling that lack of validation within myself, I then began to seek that validation outside. And so one of the things I resorted to was people-pleasing. I became a people-pleaser. If you wanted something done, I'd do it. Even if I break my back doing it, I would do it. If you wanted to treat me like garbage, and I'm your friend, you can treat me like garbage, because I still want you to be my friend. That was me, right? Now, if we look at people-pleasing and we apply the internal adl and the internal qist, over time you will gradually see your internal landscape more clearly. You recognize that your constant yes to others comes from fear of rejection. Fear of rejection, right? Not genuine love. You can see that your real thoughts and feelings have been buried under layers of accommodation. You perceive that the exhaustion you feel comes from a performing version of yourself instead of being authentic. You might begin to understand that your relationships would be healthier if built on truth rather than people-pleasing. This is your internal adl telling you, this is not right. There is a problem. There is a problem. It is not aligning to what you need to be, right? Then, when the adala activates in you, there's a small gap period, right? It says, I can see all of this clearly now. Your adl is telling you that I can see all of this clearly now. I have clarity. My people-pleasing is making me miserable and keeping my relationships very shallow. But I'm terrified of change. What if people reject the real me? What if people reject the real me? That's when Qist comes in. After your internal adala has activated this awareness inside of you, after your internal adala has told you what's happening is not right, has identified what's happening is not right, and the consequences of what is not right, this is where Qist comes in. Your heart at that point finally develops the intention. This is what I was getting at. The action of the soul is intention. You make that intention and that intentionality to align your adl with what you can see is clearly happening. You choose, or you intend to choose, to respond from your authentic self rather than fear. You deliberately orient your heart towards truth-telling instead of performance. Before you speak, you pause and ask, what does my authentic self want to say here? Rather than, what do they want to hear? This is the action of the soul. This is the action. This is the qist of the soul. The integration. When your internal adl and qist work together, you can both see authenticity is healthier and intend to practice it. Your external actions flow naturally from the internal alignment that you have, and you speak your truth kindly but clearly. You set boundaries from love rather than anger, and you show up with yourself without the internal war. Imagine your soul as a beautiful home that has been lived in for years without proper care. Furniture pushed into the corners where it doesn't belong, important things buried under a pile of lesser concerns, so on and so forth, right? Internal adl helps us to see that this home could look what it could look like even when everything is out of its rightful place. Adl will then take it and rearrange that entire beautiful home inside of you. Right? Qist then gives you the courage to actually, Adl conceptualizes what that beautiful house looks inside of you, what it looks like without the clutter. Qist then gives you the courage and the strength to overcome the fear, to start to move the furniture, dust the windows, give the walls a paint job, fix the roof, and so on and so forth. It is the foundation of all external justice. This isn't about becoming self-absorbed. It's about becoming authentic enough to serve others from a position of wholeness, from a position of awareness, from a position of clarity. When Allah asks us to be maintainers of justice, He's not asking us to fix everyone else while ignoring our own internal disorder. Please recite the salawat. He's whispering the most liberating invitation. Would you like to experience what it feels like when everything inside you is rightful and beautiful? Would you like to know the peace that comes when your values lead and your fears serve? Your authentic when your fears are dispersed and your authentic self finally comes to the fore. What are the problems? What are some of the problems that we can look at that occur when our internal adl and our internal qist are not aligned, right? When our internal adl is underdeveloped, without that adl, we become spiritually myopic. We mistake our ego's voice for our soul's calling. We let wounded emotions make decisions that belong to healed wisdom. We can't distinguish between our authentic needs and our conditioned wants. We lose the ability to see parts of us, parts of our past, which parts of our past deserve honor and which parts need healing. So when we face difficulties from our past and we want to move on from those past experiences, by not exercising internal adl and qist, we get stuck in the past because we're not able to decipher this past experience, what am I supposed to do with it? And sometimes we get stuck. And the truth is sometimes we do get stuck. And that past then develops its own patterns. And we act on those patterns, which can be very harmful to us. When internal qist is blocked now, even when we glimpse divine order within ourselves, the divine order is that adl. Without qist, we can still remain trapped. How? We see that our authentic self deserves to lead, but we keep letting fear make the decision. So we've identified. Adl has done its job. It has identified for us what isn't good for us. What's inside of us, not good for us. But without the qist, without the practical manifestation of that justice, in place of it comes fear and prevents us from moving forward. We recognize that our past should inform, but not imprison, but we stay stuck in old patterns. Many people, all of us, I'm sure all of us have experienced this. We realize that we have past patterns and we know these past patterns are toxic. It's not that we don't know. We know they're toxic, but we get stuck. We get stuck inside of them. We know our values matter more than others' approval, but we keep performing for external validation. We understand what needs to change, but we lack the courage to actually rearrange our inner world. Some of the common patterns of that internal disorder that come to play, fear becomes the dictator in the kingdom of the internal world. It influences and dictates all the decisions that we make. Our anxieties about what others will think, about failing, about being alone, about making all our important decisions while our values sit silently in exile. The values are in the shed in the backyard, and fear is living in the house like a king. Past as a prison. Staying trapped in who we used to be because changing feels like death. To some, change is very difficult. I know for me it is. Very difficult. Staying trapped in who we used to be, because changing feels like death, even when our soul is calling us towards growth and transformation. Our authentic self goes into hiding, burying our true thoughts, feelings, and dreams because we've learned they're not acceptable, while performing versions of ourselves that feel hollow and exhausting. External voices become our internal compass. External voices become our internal compass. Letting others' approval determine our self-worth, while our own inner knowing withers from neglect and abandonment. In my people-pleasing paradigm, and in my growing up, I suffered from self-worth issues. I wouldn't have been in a people-pleasing paradigm had I not suffered from self-worth issues. Right? Where did my self-worth come from? In my people-pleasing, I was looking for my self-worth and outside, be it my friends, be it the television, be it the society. It was exhausting. What freed me was one thing. What freed me was one thing that began the journey. And I say this to every one of you here who are struggling with your self-worth on a level. Your self-worth needs only be tied to one thing and one thing only. And that is, وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي. God says in the Quran, I breathed my spirit into you. وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي. I breathed my spirit into you. Therefore, you have the Spirit of God inside of you. You have God inside of you, your very being. You don't need to go outside looking for self-worth. When the Creator, the most majestic, Dhul Jalali wal Ikram, is inside of you. So learn to tie your self-worth to Allah. Because Allah would not have breathed His Spirit into you if He didn't think anything of you, if He didn't think the world of you. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for Allah. If Allah didn't love us, if Allah didn't validate us, if Allah didn't care for us, we would cease to exist. It's not even we would die. We would, in a moment, cease to exist. Always remember, وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي. That is the place our self-worth should be tied to and comes from. Please recite a salawat. What is the spiritual cost when this disorder takes over? Perhaps most tragically, our internal disorder separates us from Allah in the most intimate way, based on what I just said, because we're not actualizing Allah's Spirit inside of us. How can we witness Him clearly when fear clouds our spiritual vision? How can we hear His guidance when past conditioning drowns out His gentle whispers and His caring hand? How can we serve His creation authentically when we don't even know who we really are beneath all the masks that we have learned to wear? But there's hope. وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي. The truth is, and this truth should give peace to us with possibility. Allah created us with the capacity for both adl and internal qist. It exists in all of us. If we go back to our original lecture, adl and qist are already inside of us. We don't need to look somewhere. We don't need to go here. We don't need to go there. We don't need to read a book. It's already part of us. He's already blessed us with the ability to be just. To be just and to exercise that qist. It's for us to discover it inside ourselves. It's for us to let the noise to die down so we can hear adalat talking to us. We can hear qist talking to us. In every moment of disorder is actually our fitra challenging us to come home and arrange things. Please recite the salawat. So the time is short, and I don't think there'll be enough. Well, we will look at our case study, but very briefly. When we talk of Qist and Adl on the inside, for me, the personality that came up from Karbala was the personality of Zuhair ibn al-Qayn. Right? I'll give you some history about Zuhair ibn al-Qayn. Zuhair ibn al-Qayn was a man who lived from perhaps even before the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen, before Amir al-Mu'mineen's caliphate. He actually, of course he did. He was an Uthmani. And what I mean by that, that he was an Uthmani, he followed the line of succession and stopped at Uthman. He did not accept Amir al-Mu'mineen as the caliph after the death of Uthman. And the reason why he didn't is because he felt that Amir al-Mu'mineen was responsible for the first civil war in the history of Islam. Because as we know, after the caliphate of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the battle of Jamal took place. On one side, you had Amir al-Mu'mineen. On the other side, you had the mother of the believers, Aisha, Talha, and Zubair. So that's not a civil war, then I don't know what is. But the first civil war in Islam, and that hurt him. It really hurt him. It affected him because that's the reason he cites for not continuing on. Right? The reason why I mention him is because in history, when we read, when Imam al-Hussein decides to leave Makkah and move towards Iraq, traveling side by side with him is Zuhair ibn al-Qayn. Now Zuhair, interestingly, did not join the Imam's caravan. He didn't enjoy the Imam's caravan. Some of the reports state he went ahead, some of the reports say he stayed back, some of the reports say he traveled side by side, but he did not join the caravan of Imam Hussein. He still carried that wound. What's interesting about Zuhair ibn al-Qayn is that Zuhair knew the virtues of Imam Hussein. He knew that Imam Hussein was a righteous man. It's not that he didn't know. So this is an example. This here, if we look at and examine his internal process, because we talk about this is all about process. Examining process, looking at our own process, looking how our process works internally, looking how our process works outside. Before I continue, I also want to recognize that, look, we're talking about Adl and Qist and looking at it from the internal perspective and recognizing that it is a process. I also do want to acknowledge that internal process does not happen in a vacuum. We also do have to recognize that we have to apply Adala and Qist on the outside. It would be great if we could sit for 5-10 years, however long it takes us, to work on our Adala and Qist inside, and the world waits for us. No, the reality is that these are parallel processes that are running. And going back to another premise, though we have to partake in implementing the Adala and the Qist internally and externally, we also have to be kind to ourselves in the sense that we're also not going to get it right, especially when it comes to the outside. Especially when it comes to the outside. We're not always going to get it right. But as long as we're aware that we are processing it and we are going through a process and we are refining that process, both internally and externally. Please recite the salawat. So now looking at Zuhair ibn al-Qayn and looking at this one particular example, the conflict is that he has this hurt inside of him, but he also knows the virtues of Hussein ibn Ali. He knows this is a righteous man. It's not that he doesn't know, but he does not choose to join him. This, to me, when I look at it and analyze it, is an example where his adl is active inside of him, because he is aware internally that Hussein ibn Ali is a righteous man. Hussein ibn Ali is a virtuous man. Hussein ibn Ali is so on and so forth. So he has recognized that. His adl is active. His adala is working inside of him. But what is inhibited? His qist. To make that decision, to make that intention to at least have a conversation with Hussein ibn Ali. So as a result, he avoids, which in our psychology and psychotherapy we call avoidance. But look at Hussein ibn Ali. Look at Imam al-Hussein. Imam al-Hussein knows this about Zuhair. What does he do? He goes to Zuhair. He doesn't confront Zuhair. Let's also be clear. He doesn't confront Zuhair. He invites. He puts out an invitation to meet with Zuhair. At that point, Zuhair, because Zuhair is adil, Zuhair ibn al-Qayn knows Imam Hussein is a good man. he no longer can rely on avoidance. That avoidance now is finished. He has an obligation now to meet Hussein ibn Ali, because he knows Hussein ibn Ali, and so he meets with him. So this is an example of a companion, and this is an example of a companion who wasn't a companion, who was actually an enemy. Well, I wouldn't even say enemy, I would say adversary, right? Whose adl, or his adala internally, was active, it was working, but his qist was inhibited. Please recite the salawat. A meeting took place between Zuhair ibn al-Qayn and Imam al-Hussein, and history is very silent about what happened in that meeting. History is completely silent what happened in that meeting. Nobody knows what happened in that meeting. But once that meeting was done, Zuhair ibn al-Qayn resolved that he would join Imam Hussein. Not only join Imam Hussein, he went on to become the most ardent supporters and companions of Imam al-Hussein. As we talk about Zuhair ibn al-Qayn, we see the journey from Makkah to Karbala was long, but not all who arrived had begun with Imam al-Hussein. Among the travelers camped nearby was Zuhair ibn al-Qayn, a man who once aligned with the Uthmani cause. He had actively avoided Hussein on the road, changing routes, timing meals, anything. This man was avoided. But destiny does not delay. One afternoon, a messenger came to Zuhair's camp. "The son of Fatima requests to see you." He froze. He had never imagined that the grandson of the Prophet would call for him. His companions looked at him in confusion. His wife, seeing his hesitation, whispered to him, "Will you not answer the call of the grandson of the Prophet?" Zuhair stood. Quietly, he made his way to the tent. No one knows what was said inside, as we said. The walls do not speak this. The sand did not betray them. But when Hussein emerged, his eyes were wet and his heart had turned inside out. "By God, I will stand with Hussein," he declared, "even if I am killed." His companions are confused. Why? He doesn't say anything. On the day of Ashura, he comes to Imam al-Hussein and he asks for permission. The Imam initially is hesitant to let him go. Some reports, the sources differ on how he was martyred. Some sources say that he went to the battlefield, fought the battle, and won. And some sources say that when the time of Salat came, and the Imam and the companions wanted to pray, that he stood guard while the Imam and his companions prayed. Whatever the case, Zuhair was an ardent companion of Imam Hussein, ready to give his life, who went through his own process, who went through his own very human process, and arrived and is recorded in the history, in the pages of history, as a hero on the plains of Karbala. Ala la'natullahi al qawmi al-zalimin, inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un.